Welcome to the SCI Forum podcast. This podcast was produced by the Northwest Regional Spinal Cord Injury System in the University of Washington Department of Rehabilitation Medicine. The Northwest Regional SCI system is dedicated to improving the lives of people with SCI through excellent patient care, research, and education. To learn more about our podcasts and videos or to make a donation, go to sci.washington.edu. This podcast was taken from a live SCI forum. You can watch the video on our website or YouTube channel. Go to sci.washington.edu/videos.
Hello and welcome to the Spinal Cord Injury Forum. My name is Jeannie Hoffman and I'm a rehabilitation psychologist in the Department of Rehabilitation and one of the co-directors of the Northwest Regional Spinal Cord Injury System here at the University of Washington. Tonight we're actually doing the second part of a set of forums on pain. We had the first one with a rehab physician and a psychologist discussing current best practices for diagnosing and treating chronic spinal cord injury pain. But tonight we have a wonderful panel of individuals with spinal cord injury who are going to talk about their own experiences with pain and treatment of pain. We have to our far end here is Aditya Ganapatharaju, Rob Workman, Kirk Hennig, and Paulette de Coriolis. I'm going to be asking questions for a period of time, and then I want to open it up to the audience. So if you have a question, please just hold it till the end if that's all right. All right. So thank you all for being here tonight. I had an opportunity, obviously, to talk to you all ahead of tonight just to kind of get a bit about your backgrounds and your stories. I'd like for you to just to briefly give an overview of kind of how long you've been injured and what your injury level is, if you wouldn't mind starting with that, Paulette.
Well, it's been 18 years and partial at L3, so I'm ambulatory with a walker.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
Yeah, I've been injured a little over 30 years, and I have a C5-6 injury.
And I'm Rob Workman, and I have a T6 injury, and I've been injured for 19 years.
I'm Aditya, and I have a 4-5 level injury that's pretty incomplete, and I was injured in 2002.
So one of the things that was really remarkable in talking to you all is that there's been a lot of different issues with pain over the time that you've had your injuries. And there's been kind of neuropathic pain, there's been musculoskeletal pain, there's been pain following surgeries, pain following kind of overuse injuries or other injuries. And I wanted you to each spend a little time just telling me a little bit about kind of how you think about your pain and how you understand your pain. So does somebody want to start, or I'll call on somebody? All right, Rob.
My pain is a lot of from having to sit. I have, because my injury's right here, and it is incomplete sever, so I still do have some feeling and a little bit of movement, but from sitting so much and from the atrophy of my muscles, I have an exposed tailbone, and so I have what's been diagnosed as chronic lower back pain. And I also have, from my injury at the time, I broke a lot of my ribs, and so I have hypersensitivity up here. I also have shoulder pains from crouching forward so much after sitting so long and using manual chairs, and also overworking my shoulders. I also had a time where I was pushed out of my wheelchair and hit my head on a wall, and so I also have a C4 degeneration in my neck, and so kind of a combination of all those things. I've suffered from a lot of fatigue and a lot of chronic pain.
Kirk, you want to go next?
Well, I recall a friend of mine, we were running from Northgate down to what was in the Kingdome, and he would laugh at me because he is a runner and I was a weightlifter and could barely keep up, and he said, pain is my friend, I will run with it forever. And I guess maybe I'll look at it that way now. I have very manageable but chronic pain. I don't remember when I haven't had pain. And I use it mostly to be alert if something new develops. Yeah.
So you had mentioned that sometimes for you there's been some signals about pain telling you that something was going on, like an overuse injury, for example, or things like that.
I think that I had overuse of my shoulders, straining of my shoulders, maybe going back to when I was a student at the UW, those years, pretty early after injury, pushing up hills, and I used grade aids so I don't roll backwards, but I'd push, and I'd push, and I'd push. And I didn't use manual, or I only used a manual chair. So I think those were things that, I don't know, there weren't a lot of people that run by and go, hey, can I give you a boost up the hill? So I would wind up doing things like my arms out like this to get better grasp and leaning into it, which was actually ergonomically not so good for the shoulders. Also, sitting position, I have an incomplete injury, so although my ability to have accurate sensation is declining due to some other complications. Right. But generally speaking, I know where all my limbs are, and too much pressure, I'll move my legs around or something. Mm-hmm. So I use it as an indicator. Yeah.
Paulette?
So I have pain as well, and I have neuropathic pain, which is intermittent. And I have musculoskeletal pain. I hurt where I sit, so I brought a low-tech cushion because these chairs are hard. I've also had overuse pain in the shoulders and in the wrists and hands from overuse of the walker or incorrect position with the walker. It's just something I have to deal with.
How about you, Aditya?
My pains occupied different roles in my life post-injury, and right after I was injured, it was kind of just undescribable in all sorts of ways, in that it was throughout my body. My injury was pretty incomplete from the very beginning, but I was sedated for a long time and heavily medicated, delicious drugs. Once they cut me back on those, then I got to feel my feelings, and they were not good. That was the post-injury period. That was mostly non-helpful pain, non-allied pain, as Kirk put it. But throughout that time afterwards, the sensation and the ability to feel when things were wrong, especially on my bottom or my heels, in other high pressure areas, was really valuable, even though it was a double-edged sword in that sometimes the spidey sense would go off and it was a false alarm. But at other times it was definitely kept me out of trouble, in that I knew when I needed to get out of my chair, I knew when I needed to tilt back, I knew when I needed to move my feet in bed or whatnot. That was like the middle section. More recently, in the last couple of years or so, it's turned more into I'm dabbling in some new kinds of pain, trying out neuropathy. It's not all it's cracked up to be, and kind of stabs you in the back a little bit. But it's a thing, and so it's a buddy. Unwanted.
Yeah, so kind of a pretty broad variety. So it sounds like, though, all of you have had some level of pain at all times since your injury.
Well, that's actually not the case. That's not the case for me. If I'm not sitting, if I'm walking around or laying down, and I don't happen to have any neuropathic pain, I'm pain-free.
So you do get to 0 on that lovely pain scale
Yes,
that you guys probably have all heard way too often.
Yes.
Yeah. So you do get to 0 sometimes.
I do get to 0 sometimes.
Can you maintain 0 for a whole day?
Oh, no.
Okay. So you get 0 for parts of the day.
I get neuropathic pain for part of the day, which takes me up into the 4 to 7, and then sitting. You know, us humans sit a lot, especially if we work at a computer or a desk, or, you know, laying down all the time just does not work.
Right. And you actually are doing a career change in order to kind of give yourself a little bit more flexibility. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I'm a part-time graduate student working on a master's in counseling, which is something I can do part-time.
And you don't need to be seated all the time throughout the day.
That's right.
Yeah, that's great. So, Kirk, for you, what's your range at this point? Do you ever get to a 0?
I don't know if I do. But I'm not aware of it after I go to sleep, for instance.
So it's at least down enough so that it doesn't keep you awake.
Yeah, and even when I have high pain, I have conditioned myself that I can sleep. There was times, like I have shoulder pain 15 years ago or so. I used to sleep on my right side one night and then the left side the next night to alternate pressure points. And I quit sleeping on my right side because the pain was high enough that developed in my right shoulder that I would shake and I would sweat. And it just wasn't effective. So I fortunately sleep on my back, no problem.
Yeah.
But I studied yoga for a while with a gentleman that had studied for 65 years or so when I met him. And pretty much a master, and he taught me a little bit about how to take my mind off of that. So.
Right. So that allowed you to figure out how to get to sleep. Yeah. So at your top end of your pain scale, when things get bad, and say in the last 2 weeks, where's as high as it gets to?
The last 2 weeks, I had a strain on my left shoulder a couple weeks, within the last 2 weeks. It was probably 6 or 7, you know, but it would be jabbing pain and then gone. And it just, I couldn't identify exactly why in different positions, but I think the trigger of it was, one is that I had tried to increase some tubing exercise, coincidentally with opening this chair up, and it's real stiff to open, and I was trying to regain some independence, transferring in and out of the car after my right bicep tore, and I was forcing the chair open, and it just took more force on my left arm than what it's accustomed to. Yeah.
So Rob, how about you? Do you get to 0 ever on that pain scale?
Not really. With my neck, it was generally a steady 4 for about 5-6 years. And then with some of the activities that I've learned through the pain study, I've been able to get that down to about a 1. And for me, at a pain level of 1, that's essentially a 0.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
For my shoulders, it was pretty much a steady between a 4 and a 7 always, and I do the same thing. I sleep on my left side for part of the night, or for one night, and then my right side for another night or for another part of the night, depending on how long I sleep. And I get shoulder pains with that also, but that's been, again, with some of the stuff that I've learned through the study, that's maybe down to a 4 to a 5. And then my lower back, it was pretty much a steady 8 for about the last 10 years. And after this study, I've been able to get it down to, it might pop up to a 7 every now and then, but it's at probably a steady 4. And so it's literally half of what it was.
Right.
So
much more functional now.
Yeah.
Aditya, for you, do you ever get to 0?
Not so much lately. In the period after my injury, maybe about a year or 2 when things kind of settled down, I'd go long periods, probably years, where pain was not a significant limiting factor insofar as there were acute instances. There would be shoulder issues, tendonitis, or neck pain from bad posture. And then there's the daily intermittent pain of putting on socks, for example. I have neuropathy in my feet and in other areas post-surgery. There'd be the times that are painful, times that are associated with something exacerbating that. But when I was asked, are you in pain today? Typically I'd answer no, because it was like a if you can consider it analogous to really crappy music that you don't want playing, and the volume, like at a certain level, you just start thinking about nothing else but turning off the goddamn music, and maybe that's like 5 to you, whatever the volume setting goes up. Back then, it wasn't so bothersome. The music it was still bad, but very low.
Right.
More recently, in the last couple of years, as I've gotten more exercise and stronger on my left side, well, rather stronger through exercise, the muscles on my left side and in my back and my belly have been getting a little uppity, a little excitable, and so they kind of sass me throughout the day. And often I've noticed that the pain, or not just the discomfort, but the pain and suffering aspect, the psychological aspect that's disruptive to your life, varies with a whole range of factors, which we'll probably talk about with the treatment aspect. But whether you get good sleep, whether you've strained yourself the day before, etc. And with neuropathy, as the other folks will probably tell you, it's kind of a little gamble in trying to figure out what works for you.
Right. So you mentioned, psychological factors influence, and pain and mood are so intertwined. Has that been something that you've recognized? It sounds like you have, Aditya. And Rob, I think you talked about that too, that you really recognize that kind of fear and anxiety were triggers as well as signs of pain.
Big time.
Yeah. How about you, Kirk? Has that been true for you too?
I think when it's a more stressful time period or more frustrating, then it's easy to become more aware of pain. And just kind of maybe more of an ache, or it's not sharp pains, like pin or take your breath away pain. It just raises the ache level. Yeah.
How about you, Paulette? Has that been true for you as well?
I kind of can keep the pain and the suffering separate. I think the worst part of it is that it can interfere with sleep. But I've meditated for decades before the injury and still do, and that helps a lot.
Yeah. So actually, let's switch over to kind of talking about treatment. One of the things that was pretty remarkable as I was going through from talking with all of you was kind of a list of possible treatments. And I'm just going to do a list here, and I want you guys to just raise your hand if this is something that you've tried. We don't have to talk yet about whether it worked or it didn't work, but just whether it was something that was at least on the list of something you actually tried. Okay? So I'm going to start with some medications, and whether this was oral, via pump, or topical, just kind of go from there. So any kind of opioids, morphine, things like that. How about antidepressants? How about anti-epileptics? So things like gabapentin. How about muscle relaxants or antispasms like baclofen? How about anti-anxiety medications like Valium or clonazepam? Okay. How about marijuana? How about anti-inflammatories like ibuprofen and Aleve? How about a TENS unit?
Is that the electrical stimulation?
Yeah, E-stim, yep. How about psychotherapy like cognitive behavioral therapy or ACT therapy? Okay. How about exercise or activity, kind of increasing activity? Hypnosis or self-hypnosis? How about relaxation training? Meditation? Acupuncture? Physical therapy evaluation, so going to see physical therapy for seating or new exercises or posture. Okay. How about music? Massage? Chiropractor? Yoga? I know you mentioned yoga. I think that's a pretty good list. I'm sure there's other things I missed out on, but those were the ones I got from talking with you guys. Fairly healthy list. Yeah.
Swimming.
Swimming, so another exercise, form of exercise, swimming, yeah. So,
it might be that it takes the weight bearing off too.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's amazing. Changes your life.
so I think one of the things that this really reflects and was really one of those things I think people are really, it's good to know is that there's a lot of different things out there, and there's a lot of things that you guys have tried over the years. So how about if we focus on kind of what are you doing now that seems to work best, and maybe your least favorite thing that you've tried? So Aditya, do you want to start?
Yeah, and maybe I can tie in your last question about the psychological component, because over the years, when the pain has become more disruptive, mostly neuropathy in my back or elsewhere, a pivotal moment was when I was seeing a rehab psychologist who, because I'm a nerd, he pointed out this academic paper that had a nice flow chart. It's going to get pretty nerdy here, so close your ears if you're not into this. But it showed an arrow going two ways, right? Pain is the beginning. So one way the arrow goes into hypervigilance, avoidant behavior, depression, and that goes into a circle. And it's not a fun circle. It's not fun. But the other one goes into, well, basically not those things, and into an area or into aspects of recognizing your pain, maybe taking steps to alleviate that, but generally into an area where you're mindful of your behavior. And that was pivotal for me because, one, just being made aware that, oh yeah, I was doing that U-turn there. And, I was becoming, since my injury, I'd become super hyper-vigilant to stay on top of my stuff, like as with everyone with an SCI who has to manage, their daily life has to become. Well, I took it a little too far in that, I was making myself sick with stress, GI symptoms, and things that would manifest in trying to avoid pain, throughout the day or in the future. And so being able to, one, observe yourself in how you're reacting to your pain, what kind of behavior you're avoiding or taking on because of the perceived threat of pain sometime in the future. Things like that made a big difference for me because nerd. And if you're the type of person that's introspective or thinks a lot about what you're doing, or even, likes to or does reflect, on how your pain is affecting you or have anxiety about things like that, that type of approach, being more mindful of yourself and how you're feeling, was probably the most beneficial throughout, and still remains the best, method of managing the sassy nerves.
So that was, it sounds like that was really helpful, is to really just learn to be kind of more mindful and take a different attitude, and that was through therapy. What other kind of things do you use for treatment right now? You use some combination of medications, I think?
No, I don't touch this stuff. Actually,
Okay, that's Kirk, but we'll talk about him later.
No, honestly though, the one thing that has been the most helpful is like the very pediatric dose of sertraline, Zoloft, and that's something I've been on for since I've been injured, actually, because when I've tried to go off of it, I've went to crazy town in terms of everything becomes really painful and ungood, which in turn is a bit depressing. And also, don't be depressed because that'll make your pain worse. So try to get on that if
Right.
If
Well,
you're-
although I was going to say you're on such a low dose that you're probably
Yeah.
technically not in the antidepressant range, but you're in a pain range.
Yeah,
A lot
it's
of
in
people get
it's in
benefit
a
from.
special magical brain drug phase.
Yeah.
And besides that, like you said, muscle relaxants like I forgot the name, like clonazepam or lorazepam before working out have helped with acute nerve pain. But mostly everything else doesn't really do a whole lot. And most of the first and second line pharmaceutical treatments like gabapentin or Lyrica or the other ones, I haven't been able to get even up to a therapeutic dose or past the baby dose because I'm
Super
sensitive.
sensitive,
I'm
yeah.
sensitive guy.
You're a very sensitive guy. So, but I also know and while you said that exercise actually has given you some pain,
Yeah.
it ends up
Oh, yeah.
sometimes being helpful too. It's
No,
kind of a
totally.
mixed bag.
Yeah, like my back hurts right now, but that's just what it does. It's stubborn.
It is.
But it kind of turns into an outlook on how you'd like to live your day and your life. And there's no doubt that significant pain is not going to increase your quality of life. But I have better things to do, and I have other stuff on my
On your plate.
On my plate, yes.
Yeah.
And so I just need to, Joe is running the ship.
Right.
It's this guy.
So, Rob, we'll switch to you. You have mentioned a couple times the SCI care study that we're currently doing through the Northwest Regional Model System. And so tell me about kind of what that has brought to your treatment options and what has been helpful about that for you.
What sort of the biggest thing is since I've had my spinal cord injury, I've experienced a lot of different things in life. Like I went on a 1.5-year road trip around the country, and I felt that really empowering just because I was able to meet people that didn't know me before my accident, so there wasn't that initial pity. And so that helped me mentally be able to figure out who I am. But I was always thinking from the perspective of what experience have I had and how can that prepare me for my next experiences, kind of trying to overdo the Boy Scout model of always being prepared. And that worked great. I was able to go to community college, get enough credits to transfer to the Evergreen State College, end up getting a bachelor's degree. But I was always feeling pain, I was always feeling tired, and until I was able to do this study, that the main thing that they helped me with was understand the importance of tracking stuff. Having a little memo pad and writing down not only what pain I have, but how that pain made me feel and what I did about that pain. And, writing it down for a couple days, you start to see a couple trends, but when you do it for 2 or 3 months, it really shows you or it showed me what the triggers were to look for, so that I don't always have to feel like I have to be overly prepared for what's coming up. I can be more in the moment in finding the solutions. Some of the basic solutions that made a huge difference was knowing when to do breathing exercises, when to do stretching exercises, and just the way that I was able to change my behaviors. And this was in combination with the UW pain and mood study, but also with my neurological psychologist. Mm-hmm. And so they were able to help me to be able to realize, because one thing that I never associated myself with was fear, because I always felt like, oh, I'm a Boy Scout, I'm going to be prepared, I've gone through a lot of things, I haven't died yet, so I can go do more things. But it wasn't really me being able to take control of my life and being able to be in the moment where I was able to actually do something about my pain. And so some of the things that have changed my life are being able to do the stretching that I need to do specifically. Right after I graduated college and some of the stress started to wind down, I started having some stomach pains, and I went into the doctor and they said that I had 3 lower intestinal blockages. And they said that it was very, very dangerous, but they were very amazed that I had never been hospitalized in 18 years since my accident, for anything major. And what they told me was, it's all the medication you're on. I'm on oxybutynin for bladder control. When I was in school, I couldn't take baclofen because it made me too drowsy, and so I was taking a real low dose of tizanidine. But some of the doctors say that that's opposite for many people. I take Paxil, a very low dose of Paxil, and I take Vicodins. And they had me on 5x500s before these blockages, and the doctors are all, oh, well, we'll just fix it by going to 5x325s. But I didn't want to be on medication because in just a couple months after I had those blockages, my pain specialist came to me and said, oh, well, you've been on the same dose for 10 years. It's time to double it. And I'm like, well, don't you realize what I just went through? And so that really brought me to the focus to start looking at things. And that's how I found the pain study. And from doing the things that have triggered my knowledge of myself has really brought out the understanding that I am fearful of things, which I would have never pinned myself as being fearful of things because I was always feeling so overly prepared. But those fear has helped me to realize how to restructure my activities in my daily life to be able to not only be less pain, have less pain, but take less medicine and be more active. I've actually gotten to the point after changing some of my behaviors for better breathing and stretching, I've been able to start going swimming once a week. Mm-hmm. And that has totally changed my life and has totally changed my notion of pain because I can literally float around a pool and my back almost doesn't hurt at all. I mean, I never feel that sensation of not sitting on my butt. And so the process of going through, like I said, I had the pain study, I had the neuropsychologist, and I had my Kathy Worms at the time. And so it was finding a team of people to be able to work and being full disclosure of everything that I had gone through, what I'm currently going through, and where I kind of wanted to be, to bring all this together. And I never thought that I would get so much out of a research study, but it really helped to bring many things that I had struggled with for 18 years, especially the pain, to be able to affect my mood and to be able to affect my outlook of what I now am able to do because I'm not so debilitated. And I can tell my doctors, I don't want pharmaceuticals. I want to try to find natural ways to do that. I haven't added, but I've increased my use of cannabis, and especially with the availability of the dispensaries now, I'm able to actually pick and know the ones that actually work for me. So at home, I have 4 different kinds that I know if I have pain, if I have anxiety, if I'm not able to sleep, or if my spasms are going crazy. And so I've been able to pinpoint those things and not have the adverse effect of the pharmaceuticals. Plus, going swimming, I'm able to reduce almost all of my pain medication, of course, except the cannabis, and decrease my oxybutynin for my bladder control and decrease my spasm medication for 48 hours after going swimming. And I have never felt like Gumby like I do for that 48 hours. And it's literally feeling from a person that sits on his butt all the time, sitting on a cloud. Yeah. Just because of not only the reduce of pain and just the tightness, but I'm actually working muscles that I haven't worked in literally 20 years. So there's a little pain associated with that. But again, that goes back to pain is your friend sometimes, because you know that you're doing something.
Right, and it sounds like you've really learned, like Aditya has learned, what's good pain and what's not good pain.
Exactly.
Did you?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that it seemed like not only, Jeannie, you mentioned the wide variety of treatments that are available, but as the other panelists probably know real well, you'll have to, especially living with pain or any sort of health condition, spinal cord injury or illness, you'll have to kind of manage your own health care, and that means seeing different providers and knowing what's best for you and keeping track of what's worked for you, especially when you go to a new provider every time for something or another. And it seemed like you kind of realized the importance of that when you saw new providers, because I did too, and I kind of managed that as well. And I'm sure Kirk and the other folks here probably have stories of how you know your body best, and you know what works for you.
Yeah, I just had to switch primary care providers due to the switch in all the insurances at the first part of the year. And what I did was I took my information from Dr. Reyes here at the UW and my urology specialist here at the UW, Dr. Gore, and went into my new primary care doctor and said, these are the bios on the other people in my medical team. And so I'm welcoming you to my medical team. It's not a one-stop shop. None of my doctors are going to have all the answers, but it needs to be a collaboration. And I've come to understand that. And if a doctor doesn't want to be part of my medical team, there's more out there.
That's great.
Word.
So Kirk, tell us a little bit about I jokingly made the comment earlier about the anti-medication, but that's
true.
really been true
Yeah.
for you, hasn't it?
It is. I other than, I think that early on you asked about opioids, and probably I did have them when I was in Harborview post-injury. It was Demerol, and I don't even know the names of I don't know the words you folks are saying on a lot of these drugs. I do have a little bit of familiarity with cannabis, but that's because my buddies were doing research to refine these strains 30 years, 40 years ago,
They were pioneers.
They
right?
were pioneers.
They were doing the hard work.
But no, I grew up with a gentleman, my stepfather, who is kind of old school, ranching, and you just keep going. You don't complain. He's a World War II vet. He grew up in the Depression and the Dust Bowl, and that's a pretty high bar to follow. And so we didn't use medications on the ranch, and other than antibiotics for animals, and of course, and very few of them. So that's kind of the way I am. And I have tried acupuncture and massage. Very little massage, actually. It kind of seems like a luxury instead of a treatment to me. But I'm serious, it does. But chiropractic worked pretty good on some acute leg pain. It was just actually a wedge under my hip, kind of straightened out my back over about 5 minutes' time, and the pain went away. That I'd had radiating pain down my right leg, and haven't done much of that since. Acupuncture was very good for me post-surgery to put in a shunt on a complication I had for syringomyelia and to drain that cyst. And I had pain in my right foot, of all things, and the neurosurgeon wanted me to be on painkillers and muscle relaxers. And my body, if I did that, I got to be laying down because I can't, I'm just out. So I lived without any, I just not treating it for about 3 or 4 days after I came out of the hospital from the surgery. And then I started to just research choices. What could I do different? And acupuncture came up as a choice, and called a bunch of practitioners, told them my situation. Met with a lady, and she put needles in my scalp, and odd things. You have to be kind of open-minded, and alongside my eyeball, and it's kind of spooky stuff, But the pain went away after about the third treatment, and I can't retrace that scientific study, Maybe it would have gone away in 3 days anyways, but or 3 treatments, but I don't think so. And
Yeah.
and it's tough to not get kind of sucked in that, oh, that works so great. Maybe when they, like this lady said, oh, I can get you more function back in your arm. And I really became kind of like feeling like she was ringing the cash register, because I went 3 times a week for another 3 months or something. And that's enough.
Yeah. Move on to the next thing.
But exercise, I mentioned earlier, the tendon did burst in the long head tendon on my right bicep 3.5 years ago, and it really had adverse effect on my life. Took away a lot of independence that I previously enjoyed, mostly transportation-wise and transferring in and out of the car. But it scared me. That part is true. Because I was like, what next? I was just, honestly, I was sitting on a shower chair, and I rolled my arm over like this, and I watched the bicep drop. It was not at all related to what I was doing at the time. And I thought, wow, God help me if something else happens, So I was willing then to follow verbatim what I was told to do. And I saw Sarah Jackins. And she's expert in shoulder and elbow exercise and rehab therapy. And she started me on the lightest therapy there is. That looks like a piece of spaghetti almost. And I did exactly the number she said, exactly the position she ramped up, and it has made a difference. Yeah. So I have, although less structural stability, I have more muscle balance in the shoulder than I did before, and that's helped a lot. Yeah.
So Paulette, how about you? What are the treatments that you use now that seem to be effective?
Well, after having tried a lot of things, high-dose gabapentin seems to be the single most useful for neuropathic pain. And so, there are big differences. You weren't able to take gabapentin, and I use a high dose. And occasionally, if there's a lot of neuropathic pain, I'll bump it up for a quarter of a day. Low dose of a tricyclic antidepressant. That's more recent. The opiates did not particularly help. Let's see, what else? Pacing is very important. So not spending too much time sitting, not spending too much time doing housework, not spending too much time sitting in front of the computer, whether it's for study or for Facebook. So that was one thing you didn't mention, and that's very important. And I've heard a couple of people here mention it. What else works? Physical therapy evaluations, so I use the walker correctly. Some gait training, so I'm not as hard on my joints when I walk. Let's see, what else do I do?
You mentioned meditation.
I mentioned meditation. I was also in the SCI care pain study, and the one new thing that I picked up there was self-hypnosis, a little different than meditation. And with my neuropathic pain, I get an occasional jab, if I'm lucky, as opposed to many, many jabs in a row. So taking a deep breath right at the instant of the jab blocks the spasm that would come afterwards, and that helps a lot. And I have the whole batch of hypnosis and relaxation training tapes downloaded from your website on my iPhone. And the ones I like the best when I need it, I'll put the iPhone on the nightstand, get into bed, turn it on, and sometimes fall asleep in the middle of it. So that helps a lot with getting to sleep. Another thing you didn't mention was heat. When I have overuse in the wrist or the shoulder, I found that heat along with the anti-inflammatory helps. And that's something that's just, a few days every couple of months.
Right. And I realized I also skipped ice because I know Kirk, sometimes you
You're absolutely
use
right.
that.
Yep.
So heat or ice,
Yeah.
I think both sides of things can be really effective as well.
I use a dry sauna. That makes a big difference.
And I'll probably second that recommendation to get evaluated by a physical therapist or occupational therapist for, especially if you're a wheelchair user. Oftentimes your posture and your positioning can greatly affect the amount of musculoskeletal pain you have in your neck and shoulders. And so, like Kirk said, if you're pushing the wrong way, it might just hurt a little bit and you'll work through it. But years of that will lead to chronic pain that is hard to go backwards from. Same thing with like your spinal positioning, overdeveloping some muscles and hunching forward a bit can every
And I
day.
think use of a walker or even a cane, also if you're having some pain, it's really good to revisit a physical therapist to evaluate whether or not something has changed about your gait or how you're using your device, to see if there's
Working
some
with a
changes.
physical therapist is not a one-shot deal. You have to come back once in a while.
Get a
for-
little tune-up.
Yeah, exactly. And, sometimes I forget what I'm doing. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you can develop bad habits pretty quickly.
Yeah, I use a electric wheelchair about 70% of the time to save my shoulders. I found that especially helpful for going to school because there was just no way that I could. I went to Everett Community College and they have real big hills, and then I went to the Evergreen State College that's on 1,000 acres, and so that was
Doable otherwise.
that was a huge thing. And I regularly make 6-month appointments just to take my chairs in to my chair person.
vendor,
My,
yeah.
my insurance doesn't like it, and oftentimes they have to kind of finagle how to be able to do repairs so often. But I go in there and get that done, and then for a physical therapist, unless I need to see them for a readjustment or for something going on physically, I go and see them at least every 2 years just to go over my propulsion, my seat, the way that I'm sitting, my legs, and just to make sure, because I went up 20 pounds while I was in college, and just in the last year, I've gone down 20 pounds. And so any major difference like that is
Makes a big
necessary
difference.
to go see the physical therapist, because like you said, you get bad habits and you just keep doing them. You may not see it, but that's why I sit like this all the time, is because I didn't have the physical therapist saying you're not supposed to sit like this when you do the wheelchair, So.
Exactly. But did you have other things, or did we kind of cover most of them?
Well, I tried a lot of things, and some things helped, but they were expensive in terms of time or money, and insurance wouldn't cover them. Massage helps, but not a lot. And I pay for it myself. And then there's the, getting in the car and driving there and then driving home. Whereas something like self-hypnosis and meditation, those I carry around with me all the time.
Yeah, it makes a big difference to have things that are kind of readily accessible when you need them, as well as some of these options of things that, like the acupuncture of when you have something new, acute, something to try, and kind of the whole range in between. I want to make sure that we cover advice. So, I don't know, Paulette, do you want to start? If somebody came to you with spinal cord injury, either newly injured or struggling with pain, what kind of advice would you give them? What would you recommend?
Wow. I think the two big things for me are attitude and pacing. And pain doesn't have to rule your life. It's possible to separate pain and suffering.
How do you think you do that? How do you think you are able to separate the pain and suffering?
Oh, it's a little bit of Zen. Yeah.
And could you describe pacing?
Yeah.
You mentioned that a couple
Oh,
of times.
pacing, not trying to do too much in a day.
Pacing yourself.
Or if I have a big day planned, not have a lot the day before or the day after. I can't do as much as I used to be able to do. And being able to accept that is very helpful. And then to plan to have downtime, to plan to have work time and fun time, but interspersed with downtime, and to have flexibility in my life.
Yeah, I think pacing is one of those things that with pain is often difficult because people feel a little bit better, so then they kind of try and overdo, and then they end up kind of on the other side of things in much more pain. And so being able to pace can really be helpful to be able to get more done and be more active.
Yeah.
Kirk, how about you? What advice would you give to somebody?
Just trying to think if I can add anything here to these other three great advice, folks. Good resources. I liked a lot about what Rob said about getting tune-ups on the chair, and initially post-injury. So think back. This is a long time ago, and rehab was very different then. We used to do annual inpatient evaluations. So we would come in, and we'd be in hospital for about 5 days. And we were very closely scrutinized, and you went through therapy, physical therapy, OT visits, all kind of bladder checks, and people who were not part of your normal group saw that. And I think it's very useful to have someone who doesn't see you regularly, see you an objective individual, to say, by the way, what if you put your hand slightly differently when you transfer? Or did you recognize you're always sitting like this? Very often I think the case is not. And might we add a little bit of different stretching or exercise? Out of my bicep issue, I not only met with Sarah, but I met with another physical therapist later to try to develop better ability to transfer. And a conversation sprang from that about, and I may not get the word correct, macrophageal release.
Myofascial release?
Myofascial release, thank you. And I think it's very, very useful. I have the good fortune to be able to recognize pinpoint areas where basically a knot or a spasm of muscle could be. And then that practitioner would put pressure on that point. And I would focus on that tremendously, maybe for 5 or 10 minutes, nothing else. And then it would dissipate and it's gone. And I don't know whether it's self-hypnosis, meditation, yoga, or just fortunate. But I can often identify a spot that aches or is point painful and think about that spot and just concentrate on it and get it to relax. And I think to be open about the potential for other things besides a chemical solution or strictly what the AMA has said. And I know our group has been more open to alternative medicine than it was when I first did rehab too. It was very structured then. So I think activity is very important, and both heat and cold is very structural, helpful. And then to be alert, like Rob and I were talking downstairs, as the temperature changes. I mentioned my legs were tighter the last few days. Well, but we've had this temperature swing, I think it'd be better that we're warmer. But our bodies don't react quite as quickly, perhaps, as they did. So,
so keep that in mind.
Yeah, and it's a moving target, unfortunately. Yeah. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Rob, what advice would you give?
Some of the biggest things that I've learned is, like she said, attitude is 90% of everything. That was the first thing that I learned coming out of my accident 19 years ago, and I believe that's what helped me come out of it. That included with the support of my family. Second thing that I learned very quick coming out of the hospital is, especially being newly injured and the fact that I had lived 18 years as an able-bodied individual, I have to expect 80% ignorance wherever I go. That mentally keeps me okay. I just expect it. It's the way it is. And I can make changes every now and then. Like when I'm at a restaurant and the soap dispenser's like 6 feet high, or the paper towels like behind the 3-foot sink. I can say something about it, and maybe it'll make a difference, maybe it won't, but it makes me feel better to say something. And so expecting that 80% ignorance has truly helped my life. The other thing is you have to be your own advocate. Like I said, if your doctor's not telling you what you want to hear, or they're not listening to you, there's many other doctors. Caregivers are so important to have a good team, somebody that you not only get along with, but also has a good attitude. You don't want a negative Nancy to be doing your physical therapy or shrugging every time you ask them to take the garbage out, or just some little thing that if you had to do, it would be 10 times harder. Another great thing is this reacher that I have. I break them about every 3 to 6 months. That's just the way it is. But without this, I could not live independently. I've lived on my own, myself and my cat, for 8 years. And I would never, well, unless she was cute, want a roommate. Because they just get in the way and there's more stuff. Yeah, they're there to help you, but then there's things that get put up on a shelf that you can't reach and that you'll never be able to reach unless you have somebody. So it's kind of a give and take. But this reacher not only allows me to live independently by being able to move things out of my way, or my cat out of my way, but it also allows me to not overly extend myself. Sometimes when I drop my reacher, I wish I had a reacher to grab my reacher. And so I have to do that.
You need an extra one around.
But with my reacher, I believe I only overextend myself maybe like 5% of the time compared to what I would not do without my reacher. So again, that and making sure that your equipment is up to date. There's lots of places like the Donor's Closet in Edmonds where you can go and essentially get free equipment, get free repairs, get reachers for $5. They have medical beds. Make sure that you have a mattress. The mattress is the most important thing that I have found, because after my blockages and after some reoccurring bladder infections, I was on antibiotics for 4 months. After that 4 months, I actually slept for 7 hours at a time. Before that, for 12 years, I had only slept at the most 4 hours at a time because of my catheterization regimen. And so after taking those antibiotics and after actually getting some things fixed in my bladder, I'm able to sleep up to 7 hours at a time. That sleep difference has just totally changed my life, not only with my mood, but with my activity and with my outlook of what I can do as an individual.
That's great. How about you, Aditya? What advice would you give?
Well, I think there's two aspects of pain that I think there's a lot of insight from what the panelists said. One was the physical aspect, and besides the treatments that other folks here have tried, I can't emphasize enough how much exercise is really beneficial, both in terms of lessening your pain or making your pain more tolerable, but increasing your overall sense of well-being to the point where pain can become something in the background. And that typically means exercise, typically means like strenuous exercise a few times a week at least. And that can really not just improve your life right after, the rush of nature's own little opioids, but it goes a long way into just improving yourself in terms of your energy levels and your ability to sleep better at night, to maintain an impressive physique like this. I don't just roll out of bed like this. I don't know why people laugh when I say that. But the other aspect that's huge is the cognitive aspect, because you're usually not in pain when you're unconscious, right? So a lot of it is psychological insofar as how you react to the pain and how maybe you've been conditioned to react to the pain throughout your life and before your injury and after your injury and the environment that you live in. All of those things affect that interplay. And for me, like I said, kind of analyzing the way I thought about my thoughts, the way I thought about my experiences was really beneficial. And one cognitive therapy in particular, ACT, which stands for Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, incorporates a lot of the methods that several presenters have mentioned here and there. One is an acceptance of the unwanted thing in your life or things in your life, pain, depression, etc. They're going to be there. It's like crappy weather. It's going to happen, all right? It's going to happen, dude. It's that's how it is. But once you prepare for that the best you can, and sometimes if there's, the analogy is if there's 5 feet of snow, sometimes you have to stay in. There's a lot to be said for staying true to the values that you hold and not avoiding the things that you want your life to be full of. And lastly, I think something that I heard kind of over and over again is really being kind to yourself. That's something a lot of people have difficulty with, injury or not, but letting yourself, pacing yourself insofar as letting yourself just be in pain for a little while and taking it easy, and that's okay. Or having pain while you're doing something and have it be just that. Not having this negative experience blowing up into something bigger, more or less, than what it is. It can just be that. And I think all of those aspects have been beneficial, and it's a continual process. You'll have ups and downs. I'm surely going to be in pain again, and I won't have the smile. Probably on the drive home, I'll be scowling, and people will think I'm just an angry jerk on the road. But it's just it's the life.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to turn it out to the audience. Questions that you guys have? So the question is do you think that somebody could really take the advice and get to where you guys have reached this, very Zen self-care point of view that you all have gotten to? Could you do it without the process and the struggle that you all went through in finding all the different roads? Or do you think it's possible to get there a little easier? Rob?
I think that you have to go through a little bit of a process, but I think that one of the most important things to do is to seek out other individuals that are in different stages of their after injury. Some people, it's all about a maturity level too. Some people can do things in 2 years that some people have to do in 10 years. But having a support group or having a mentor, somebody that has gone through it, is real nice, because a lot of the things that I dealt with I was 18 when I was injured. I hadn't been in the hospital. I didn't deal with doctors. How would I know that? And I really sought out individuals that would be able to help me try to figure that stuff out. And talking with some of the older gentlemen or the longer injured gentlemen that were at the Spinal Cord Injury Forum over the years that I've gone to, just listening to their stories and hearing the inspiration of how they've been able to overcome it, the more information is better. And so I'm just really happy for the things like YouTube that, people actually go on. I don't, but people actually go on there and make videos. And so it's kind of a history of a legacy of what other people have gone through. And so if you can't find a local support group, I'm sure that there's things out there. Just just to reconnect, because we don't have the answers, and especially a spinal cord injury, there are so many things in your life that change. I mean, just being able to brush your teeth by pulling underneath a sink versus brushing your teeth sideways because, there's cupboards under there. I mean, people don't think about that stuff, but only at hotels can you find an area that's accessible to brush your teeth. I mean, it makes no sense. So.
Does anybody else want to respond to that?
Yeah, I think it's easier now. When 18 years ago, I won't name the hospital, it wasn't this one. After a relatively short stay, they showed me the door and I said, well, what about, support? And they said, well, here's a list. And they didn't have any themselves, and, the SCI, whatever, support, it's like, oh, well, I was doing that out of my home, but I'm not doing that anymore, and do you know anyone else now? And then it was some years before I discovered this place, and as well as these forums. So these forums were very helpful, as well as individual appointments with doctors and nurse practitioners and physical therapists. Coming to the forum, I learned a lot. So I think it would have been faster if I had discovered this place earlier, but that wasn't the case.
So key important is finding people who can help you, to direct you to other people as well as to providers who are really familiar with your condition,
Right.
who can give you both.
Yeah.
I wanted to add something, and maybe you're more familiar with the literature, but as far as I know, there's no accelerated program to wisdom and enlightenment, and oftentimes you kind of have to, you only in retrospect know what works for you and what doesn't so much, but like you said, that doesn't mean there isn't a huge amount of a wealth of knowledge and past experiences that other folks have been in, similar to yours, that just knowing that that's there can be really empowering, largely because pain is, implicitly a lonely experience. You're going to experience it by yourself, and it's going to stay with you, whoever comes in and out of your life, and it's going to be there as your special little friend that just won't shut up sometimes. And so knowing that, hey, these other folks have their own special little friends that are equally annoying, this is how they deal with them, and when they get kind of sassy, you need to get some strategies. Just knowing that you're not as alone as you may feel when you're in pain is in itself really beneficial. And the ways that other people have coped with their pain, or brushing their teeth, not having to go to hotels to brush their teeth, all of these things are a huge improvement in the quality of your life they can be.
So the question was about hypersensitivity and kind of feeling like you're on fire. I know that a couple people mentioned hypersensitivity issues. Without taking so much medication like gabapentin that kind of knocks you out, what other things have you found that have been effective? Who wants to start? Did you?
I have some hypersensitivity from time to time in one area, and I rub it. And as soon as I touch it, it hurts like hell, but after rubbing it for a while, it goes away. And then as far as the high dose of gabapentin, it turns you into a zombie for a while, but that goes away. And unlike some drugs, the pain benefit stays, but the zombie part dissipates after time.
How long did it take you? How long did it take you to get past the zombiness as you were increasing your dosage of gabapentin?
Oh, months.
Months.
Yeah.
I don't know that this is the same, because it's not skin on fire, but I mentioned this right foot being very painful after the surgery on my neck, and it still is at times. And I know from experience that if I basically do self-range, reach, like when I'm dressing in bed, hyper bend the foot backwards, like I'm stretching the heel cord, and it hurts. Like, not quite enough to make my breath stop, but fully get my attention. And hold that for a couple minutes, that then the rest of the day will be a very nominal amount. If I don't, all day, that pain will be in those toes at a level that will interfere.
Rob, did you have suggestions?
Yeah, what mine is mine's around my rib cage, and so when I broke my ribs, they were broken in ways that they couldn't really repair them. So my muscles grew back like that, and so my muscles are always pulling against each other, so it feels like I'm being stabbed by a knife and tickled at the same time right in here. And the ways that I've had to deal with that is a lot of self-meditation, self-hypnosis, also doing different things with heat and cold, especially in the shower. I've been able to find different ways that, make sure that the water's not too cold, because I'm real sensitive to cold, because that seriously triggers all my hypersensitivity. The hardest thing about hypersensitivity is learning where your boundaries are, where your limits are, because especially down here, even just doing slight exercises, I can trigger that, but it's knowing that range. And it's hard to be able to find a solution until you know those ranges. But what I would suggest for you, somebody that has something that goes in different parts of their bodies, not just right around here, is possibly doing some swimming. Whether it be in a swimming pool. I know that they have regular swimming pools that have lots of chemicals in them, but they keep you safe. They also have a lot of saltwater pools that are coming, more readily available around. I get different sensations and different relief from going into a hot tub and also the dry sauna. So it's kind of testing different elements to know where your levels are. It's going to be a trial and error thing.
How about you, Aditya? Do you have any other recommendations or other things to try?
Well, everything. Yeah,
Try everything.
all of it, and a bunch of times. And you're going to lose hope. That's going to happen, meaning you're going to be at a point where you're really crushed. It's soul crushing at times. And then it's going to get better too. You'll feel better at some point. And in those times where you have the energy, you have a lucid state of mind, is the time to do work in finding out what works for you. And I can kind of relate to the feeling like you're on fire. I've been on fire all night, I know. Am I right, gentlemen? Ladies, right? No, but really, it burns. It burns.
Yeah, I was going to say
but
hot, yes, on fire. You haven't really been noticeably on fire, but I'm sure you've
just
felt
on the
like you're
inside,
on fire.
and it's really what's inside that counts.
Yes, exactly.
But the point also is not to take yourself too seriously in terms of these are sensations, and it sucks. Let's be honest, this is kind of a shitty deal. But allowing yourself to say that and realize that, this is not the best, is in itself empowering, knowing, accepting the situation of being uncomfortable and not necessarily seeing, a whole tragic loss from that is a huge step. Being able to continue doing the things you want, both despite and really in light of uncomfortableness, suffering, emotional distress, is huge. And it takes a lot of work to get there. It doesn't happen without lots of practice. So that's one of the things that Chris was talking about in terms of, is there an easier way to kind of get this experience? And unfortunately, it's just like exercise. You don't go for a 5-mile run one day and then become fit, right? So the way you think and the way you think about yourself and your pain and how shitty it feels right now to be burning all of those have been ingrained in your mind for a long time, and you can't unlearn those things. There's no process of unlearning. You can really only learn new ways to think about your pain and to think about how you're going to deal with your pain. And, maybe you just need to let your pain know that you're a badass and you're not going to let it stop you from, living your life.
I want to thank you guys all so much for being willing to share your stories and talk tonight. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the SCI Forum podcast. To learn more or to make a donation, please visit sci.washington.edu.